So that's what I'm saying. The text is like an object. It's gonna change perspective based on where you're standing. I don't know.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I missed you, baby sweet. It was a day.
It was a day.
Please tell me you're seeing this too.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clawson.
Oh, that is superb.
That is delicious. We're drinking a Lily Pad Hazy IPA today from the one and only Hellbent Brewing Company.
And that it's the only one that we can walk to reasonably quickly and get back with delicious beer that might be different and is always fresh.
Yeah, I don't know that we've ever really talked about kind of our routine for the podcast, where we always start off with a quick walk down the street from your apartment to Hellbent Brewing Company, pick up a growler, in this case a couple cans, come back and enjoy them during the show.
Yeah. The thing they're missing there is the frost-chilled glasses and tossing the growler, or the cans in this case, in the freezer right up until when we record, so it's nice and ice cold and delicious. Today we're talking about Tribeca. We're also going to do a first impressions of some upcoming Fantasia 2021 film festival titles, just so we can kind of get a head look at some of the options we'll have. Whether or not we watch those options is to be determined.
First impressions may help us decide.
Hopefully will. That's why we do them.
Mm-hmm.
I will include here at the beginning of the episode that I will put in the show notes a direct link to my ranked list of Tribeca film titles that I saw. Michael was much less determined to watch as many of these films as he could, and I think watched a total of 3. I made up for that by watching 47 others, so we have a nice round number of 50.
That's what I was going for.
I'll put the that ranked list in there. Just a heads up. The top 10 that I had were Lorelei, which I think will get a lot larger release later. It's got Jenna Malone and Pablo Schrader in it. Great performances. Neat little indie debut called Poser. Another debut called Ultrasound. It's going to be playing at Fantasia as well. So I'd recommend everybody seek that out if they're attending. Italian Studies, which we'll talk about today with Adam Leon. So that's positive. Socks on Fire, a fun documentary that won Best Documentary at Tribeca in 2020. I really enjoy it. It's when you watch it, you can kind of feel a place. Like you have that place in you now. The Justice of Bunny King, which stars Essie Davis, directed by Gaysor Thavat, is number 6. And I will have an interview that I'll tag on to the end of this episode, where I interview Essie Davis about her role. And then I'll also, at a later date, release an interview with Gaysor Thavat, who directed the film. And it's her directorial debut. After that, we have another film we're talking about today. Last Film Show. A film Michael's much less positive on than I am. Then rounding out my list, I have Glob Lessons, a really fun, just a very focused directorial debut, screenplay, and performance, all from the same female writer, director, performer, producer, Nicole Rodenberg. I think she's going to be around for a long time and always going to be distinctive from what I saw. A documentary about China called Ascension, which was just flabbergasting. And another directorial debut called The Novice from Lauren Hadaway, who did the sound design, or some of the sound design for the film Whiplash.
The Novice I've heard quite a bit of buzz about, I think especially for the performance, right? From a girl who I know, I think, only from Orphan. Is that right?
The Orphan.
Isabel Furman, is that right?
That's correct. Dead on.
And you were a fan, yeah?
I have a lot of problems with the films at this film festival, so my top 10 is not necessarily like these are must-see films, but they are the best films, in my opinion, of the festival. I think it's worth engaging with. Out of a lot of directorial debuts, it's probably one of the more interesting original voices this year. I would definitely recommend it over something like Saint Maud.
Okay, all
Shots
right.
fired.
Shots fired. Cool. Is it a horror movie? Is that why you compared it to Saint Maud?
So I would compare it more to Whiplash.
Oh, right.
So it's
why say what brings Saint Maud to mind?
directorial debut, female director, female director, directorial debut, same year. I'm just making.
But it's a sports
comparisons.
movie, right? I don't know if I would recommend someone.
No, I would say that it's up until a few moments in Saint Maud. I think the tones are very similar.
I see.
Of kind of walking this line of, I don't know why this is happening. Why is this behaving like that? And a lot of looming dread, a lot of like weird things happening, some lightning strikes, some rowing in the storm. There's some moments.
Moodiness.
I think if you watch it, you'd be like, yeah, this is a lot more like a horror-esque thriller than a conventional sports film. It's very much not a conventional sports film. It's like a woman who seems to hate herself and has a competitive drive that seems insane. It's a lot closer to like a horror whiplash than any sports film.
Yeah. You know how many of the films on that list have distribution? Some of them?
None of them. The
Zero.
only one that I know that you can watch is going to be... Which one? I just had it in my head. Oh yeah, Ultrasound. And that's at Fantasia.
Right.
But otherwise, I don't think anything's been formally acquired. So, have to
There
work
you
on
go.
that. Maybe Ascension. I could see Ascension getting acquired by Netflix and released under the radar. Just a tight little documentary. But I'll have that list in there, and as availability comes up, if you have a pro account on Letterboxd, it'll tell you where you can watch it. On to some first impressions, though, Michael. We have The Suicide Squad and All the Moons, both of which are playing at Fantasia 2021. Which would you prefer to watch first?
Let's do The Suicide Squad.
We're all gonna die.
I hope so.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Here's the deal. We fail the mission, you die.
If we find out any information you give us is false, you die.
If we find out you have personalized license plates, you die.
What? No.
If you cough without covering your mouth...
Hardly. Although, that isn't an open invitation for you to cough without covering your mouth.
All right. That was the trailer for The Suicide Squad from James Gunn. What'd you think?
Of unknown affiliation to Suicide Squad from David Ayer, 2016. I have multiple things with this movie. I am not that impressed by what I saw. I have a feeling it will be fun and relaxing to watch as a popcorn flick, which, a high quality popcorn flick is very rare these days based on what I've seen recently. Things like Infinite or the Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. Like, these things are not of high quality, and when they are even serviceable, it's kind of rare. So in that, I'm kind of eager. I have a past tense with these heroes, so that's kind of interesting to me. I like a lot of these performers. Most interesting to me is Sylvester Stallone doing voice acting of a giant shark. He's always made fun of for his voice, and the idea of him doing voice acting and getting into his uncomfortable zone, I think is just a really cool thing that Gunn decided to do casting-wise. I suspect I will watch this and forget it, but I think I might enjoy watching it. How about you?
Very low chances I would take the time to seek this one out. This is the kind of thing that's just not really in my wheelhouse at the moment. I think it looks so tacky. I just don't understand the appeal of this kind of thing anymore. I've never felt like so out of touch with the mainstream at the moment, where it just looks so tacky. I don't vibe with the humor. I just don't understand how this is still so popular. I'm just increasingly numbed by it.
That's exactly. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I'm still...
Numb is better than horrified sometimes. Sometimes, not
fair.
always.
It's true. It is not like an active hate, There are movies where I despise what they're trying to do. It's not that kind of thing. It's just, this is just not going to do anything for me. I'm not quite sure what the relation is still between this and the first one.
Like I said,
think it's a do-over?
Unknown
Okay. Yeah.
relation.
I did see the
I think
original.
it is kind of a do-over. Like, I think they're trying to do like a unified DCU with multiple worlds now, and I don't I'd have never read the press release, and I don't really care, to be honest, about the differences, but I know that this one also has Margot Robbie, and I think the same guy plays Boomerang, but Who cares? Really? Like, I'm going to watch this for a few laughs and maybe some action sequences, and then I'm going to forget about it forever.
Yeah. That is one way to do it. Yeah, I don't know. I can't see myself getting actually putting this on at any point in time. I think it's pretty unlikely.
Not even in the middle of Fantasia Film Festival.
Probably not. No, I think there will be more interesting stuff than this one.
Well, we
so
tried.
Probably the loudest and buzziest title, though, for sure.
Well, you can look forward to Michael's review of the anti-superhero film Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage, at least.
Venom, I kind of like. That's a weird exception to the general trend with me. Venom, I thought was kind of entertaining because it's kind of messy. I almost, like, it's weird how at this point, like, some of the so-called sloppier superhero movies, to me, feel the most entertaining just because they just feel different.
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot of messy, lower quality, quote-unquote, superhero films that I find a lot more interesting than the superb one. Like, I'd rather have a 3-hour discussion about something like Bloodshot or the upcoming Morbius than, like, any Marvel successful film, like Infinity War, Civil War, or whatever.
Yeah.
But on to the next Fantasia 2021 title, All the Moons.
Eguna oso arriskutsua du.
Nola zenatu ninduzu?
Musu batez. Orain, ilargi guztiak ikusiko ditu.
Ukitu gaituzte!
Zer egin dut?
Korrika leketa ginen.
All right, Michael, that was the trailer for All the Moons. From what I gather, this is a period piece about a vampire. What do you think?
I would say I'm perhaps a little mixed about it. Can't say it strikes me as anything that looks too out of the ordinary in its like craft or storytelling, but it looks like the center is on a young actress as the lead. She did sort of catch my eye. I was somewhat drawn in by her screen presence. The material is not exactly my first choice of things out there, but it looks like it could be entertaining as a thriller. The color seems a little washed out to me. I think visually I was maybe a little underwhelmed by it. What about you?
Yeah, I mean the trailer did a good job. It played lovely music that I'm very fond of. So there's some violas going on. There's some higher tune violin strings going on. There's a lot of classical music. There's conversations about angels and demons, and it seems that this girl may be able to go out in certain daylight times. There's a lot of, genre convention there, but it does look like it's a sincere interpretation of the genre. At an age that is uncommonly depicted in these. Other than Let the Right One In, I don't recall very many films centered on children as vampires or victims of vampirism. So I'm definitely keen to this one, and that it's a film festival entry that looks sincere, not entirely original, but meaningful in the way that they interpreted the conventions. And for that, I'm always willing to give an opportunity or a chance to see that. And I do like the period that they chose and the interest in ideas of this post-war world and fire being exchanged for electricity and these machines that are called planes soaring in the sky beside birds now, and how the old romanticism of the vampire can live in the new world, which is, I think, where the genre gets most interesting in its conventions.
Yeah. We'll just have to wait and see. You summed it up well. I don't know that I have too much more to add yet.
I would be willing to discuss it on the episode. We'll see if I can talk you into it,
or
if there's nothing better.
TBD.
All right, on to False Positive, now playing on Hulu.
Welcome to the family.
How are you?
A little crazy. I'm seeing things.
Honey, me too. I'm having the wildest mommy brain lately.
I don't think it's mommy brain. I think Dr. Indle did something. I think they're in on it.
In on what?
Just to pick up with that last comment, I think this is one of the few titles at the festival that is already available, yeah?
There's actually like a good half that I saw that are now
already
playing.
on streaming?
They just suck. And they weren't on my list, so I couldn't discuss them. Also, this one sucks. Werewolves Within is also now available. It sucks. There's a Roadrunner, which I didn't get to be honest, which I think is now playing in theaters and on VOD. A story about Anthony Bourdain. Wolfgang, a documentary about Wolfgang Puck. There were quite a few entries that went like...
Oh, that's the Disney Plus one, yeah.
Exactly. So basically they played Tribeca and then they released within a week.
Yeah.
I think Audible was another one of those, which we've already discussed from Hot Docs, which came out 2 days ago on July 1st. We're talking about everything on July 3rd, but it won't be released for quite some time. So, false positive, Michael. This is an A24 film that's direct to VOD streaming on Hulu. It stars Pierce Brosnan and Alana Glazer with Justin Theroux. What do you think of this shitpot?
Well, I think we're in agreement. I was not a big fan of this movie either. Talk a little bit about the story. This is more or less a horror movie with some kind of comedic and satiric elements, but
Attempted.
Fair
I
enough.
wouldn't agree that it is. I'd say they attempt that.
There you go. We have Alana Glazer and Justin Theroux as this fairly well-off New York couple trying to get pregnant, struggling to get pregnant, and they go see this high-end, very reputable fertility doctor played by Pierce Brosnan. They're able to kind of jump to the front of the line. He is a very popular and busy man, but Justin Theroux's connections to him in the medical community sort of jump them to the front of the line, and she manages to get pregnant. She soon discovers she is pregnant with not one, not two, but 3 babies, and tough decisions must be made after that. I think it'd be tough to find a review that doesn't talk about this in relation to Rosemary's Baby in some way. I think that's kind of the obvious riff it's doing, but with some more comedic, or probably satiric is the better word, attempts being made. Is that fair?
Yeah, attempts. I love that word, attempts. It attempts a lot, and it just fails so many times.
Yeah, I think there are these kind of different tones at play that just don't really come together for me. I wish, for one, that this was just plain a more frightening movie. I think, so much of this is about kind of the paranoia that we watch Alana Glazer's character going through as she kind of is living through this pregnancy. There's very little that I even kind of remember or could talk about scene-wise that really stood out as interesting or memorable in terms of what she's even going through. I think there's almost just kind of a lack of material. That's part of the problem for me. I couldn't really tell you that much about what she goes through that is so sort of disturbing. There's really just not even enough here, I think, for it to be a good movie.
I completely agree. It's mainly filled with emptiness, and every aside and every allusion is empty in and of itself. One of my favorite commonly supporting actresses, but I think she's a fantastic lead actress, is in this film. Her name is Gretchen Mol, and she is just an incredible performer when she's given the chance, kind of like a Diane Wiest, where she can just make you feel so many things with just how she delivers a line and chooses to make her face look like she just can do that. And she has a scene here where she just appears and asks for a magazine back and then leaves. And it should have been so much more ominous and intruding. And she played it perfectly. But the way that that Alana reacts and the way that the scene just kind of sits and looks conventional and doesn't do anything image-wise that's enticing or informed or cohesive to the other pieces of imagery, removes any sense of heightened stakes in that moment, where the idea is that things are getting unreal or superstitious. Instead, we are confronted with the total lack of film linguistic understanding that this director has. Like, he's referencing a bunch of things, but isn't actually doing anything cohesive with his piece, which is like, you know, we talked about Sergio Leone. Sergio Leone, all he did was steal, but he informed his voice, and he had this authentic voice that was pulling from all these different things constantly. And this is like stealing all these different conventions and ideas and basic things and doing nothing with them.
Were there other movies that were coming to mind that you were...
this is directly, like, I think it's been out for a while now, the documentary 3 Identical Strangers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The end of that, just like this. There's also another documentary called Baby God. Just like this. It's literally about a doctor who does this. Like, there's tons of documentaries that have been coming out about this. And I knew within 5 minutes what this was going to be. Once we meet Pierce Brosnan, it's like, okay, he's only going to... Like, he's here for one thing. And that's no fault of Pierce. I think that he does try. But he's not even lit interestingly. Like...
I think Pierce Brosnan is horribly miscast. It just made me think about how...
I like him as a comedy guy, and I feel like they told him to play it like a straight comedy, where he's supposed to be the straight man for the comedy, and he's supposed to smirk at a few things, and I felt like he was just led the wrong way, because he's done other comedic roles where he's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, I mean... I think more and more I may be finding what this seemed to sort of reveal to me is how often big stars and small indies just don't work for me. And I feel like sometimes smaller indies can feel like it's a big get when they cast a more or less of Pierce Brosnan I would essentially consider a star. He was James Bond, for crying out loud.
I wouldn't call him a big star, but I would say that he still has the resounding star quality.
Yeah, I mean, I would say he's a household name. He's incredibly recognizable. That indies don't really sometimes.
But
don't
can you
really...
tell me the last big budget film he did?
Like Mamma Mia.
Okay. I didn't watch that one. Big. If he's in those, then okay.
Yeah.
Fair play.
Yeah, I mean, the point is that, like, he's incredibly recognizable. He once had great stardom, at the least. That these smaller indies kind of think is a big asset, but they really don't know how to kind of conceal that stardom within a character. I just think it's so out of whack with the size of the movie and the scale of the star. It's just not, the compatibility is just not good. Which I feel like sometimes that actually, like, is the opposite of what people do when they attend film festivals. Is like, we look for the ones that have the big stars, and sometimes I end up thinking that's the wrong way to do it.
I don't. That's why I prioritize directorial debuts. Unfortunately, this was one, so I focused on it, and it was an A24 release, which, you know, A24ism is a thing in film lovers community. Like, you feel like you can trust that. Now I've been burned back to back with Saint Maud in this, and if The Green Knight isn't one of David Lowery's best films, then I'm gonna feel scorned.
Yeah, Alana Glazer was definitely the pull for me here, more so than A24 or Pierce Brosnan. That's for sure.
It's interesting to see her take on this role. That's what I was thinking. But the reason it was on my radar as like a possible good film was the A24 acquisition. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a bummer. I think there are aspects of this that I think could have been pretty funny and that do feel somewhat fresh to me. You know, I think some of the satire around kind of pregnancy culture and how sort of condescending even women can be to each other when they sort of talk about these phrases like mommy brain that sort of diminishes what everyone's going through, and they sort of downplay whatever kind of anxiety or stress these women are experiencing. They just, kind of toss it off as something quote unquote called mommy brain, which this is a very, very, very repeated phrase throughout this movie. I think a lot of this could have just been funnier, or had a little bit sharper of an edge to it. I think a lot of it's just kind of soft pedaled. I think that we have two different readings on why it's bad.
I think you're wanting more distinction and originality from these performances, and your point about Pierce is, I think, correct and interesting, but I didn't even get to go that far in logic, because for me, I was like, this doesn't work on the page. The problem here is the screenplay. No amount of performance can fix a screenplay, really, unless the editor's a genius, and you're lucky. And sometimes that happens, like 2 times out of 100, a bad movie can be edited into a great movie, maybe, right? It depends. But here it's like, what version of these conventionalities was ever going to be interesting? I don't care if you would have cast 3 of the next greatest indie actors. I don't see how I would have ever felt differently about this film. It falls apart on the page, and you can do whatever you want casting-wise. You can do whatever you want with the editing. The director's uninformed choices and lack of distinctive vision and cohesion in the language of film and presenting visual imagery and this screenplay, they fall apart.
Well, that's like it's both. It's both what's on the screen and on the page.
Yeah, because I mean, sometimes you can try to dazzle us. You can Refn. You can J.J. Abrams. You can Michael Mann. You can show me a bunch of beautiful light and smoke for like half a movie and make me forget how much I hate the screenplay. But they didn't do that here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I hate the material. Like, I think the material is very Rosemary's Baby-esque, and that's great material. I think the fact that it's about a character experiencing paranoia as she undergoes pregnancy and she's kind of being gaslit. I mean, I don't have any problem with that in
Did you
itself.
feel the paranoia?
No,
I felt like I was watching the paranoia.
Well, yeah, but that's not a question of the material. Like, that's more kind of, I would trump that more up to execution. And I think it's just almost like a little bit vague about what she's even paranoid about. She starts to get the hunch that Pierce Brosnan, the doctor, has done something to her.
And then that he slept with Justin Theroux.
Yeah. It's just not very unsettling. It just doesn't have the power to chill, whether it's the filmmaking or the performances. It just doesn't really produce an effect. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I would say that this material is, unproducible. I mean, I honestly don't think it's that far in its structure from something like Get Out, which is sort of a melding of kind of comedic satire and outright horror. I would think someone with a kind of a sharper vision might have brought this together a bit more clearly and effectively.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly auteurs that can literally take like a leaflet and make it compelling. But if we're just looking at like what is spoken and like what the storylines are, like it, to me, I think it's, I don't think that it's producible personally as a screenplay. Like, it just doesn't do anything that seems original or informed or has a cohesive feeling of comeuppance or restriction or risk or anything. I hate the conventionality of the ending at the beginning here. It does no good. And then the director doesn't have that, Roman Polanski quality to make this look so visually compelling and moving and horrifying just to look at, that the material ends up working. It looks very plain. The offices are shot very boringly. It all feels very plain looking. There's no deep philosophical questioning that I had. Like I mentioned, I've seen plenty of documentaries about this recently, and it's very much a cultural thing of the moment here, where it doesn't feel like there's there's a reason or a purpose to it, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I would maybe say that the purpose feels very muddled. Like, it feels like it very much has things it wants to say. It feels like it has a philosophy, which is about, like, women feeling like they're agents. They're stripped of agency in some way in sort of a patriarchal system, the system of pregnancy and everything around it. There's, like, that whole kind of montage that this other doctor she goes to, who is more earthy and herbal. Yeah, it's not a doctor. She's like a
midwife or
midwife. Yeah,
something.
Yeah, and we get this total kind of like non-diegetic montage where she's talking about like the history of pregnancy and the practice of how men have come to control it and all of that. I think that is very poorly folded into the movie itself, but I feel like the movie very much has ideas. It's just that they're not all that persuasively or cogently articulated.
Yeah, I think if that would have been the focus without this homage to Rosemary's Baby, I would agree, but it's that it's pulling all this stuff in, and it doesn't actually have any focus because it's trying to reference and pull and talk about so much that it ends up talking about essentially nothing. You've mentioned a couple times, and I lost my train of thought, that about this interesting thing with the mommy brain and, you know, depictions of women in parenting that are more accurate. And I actually think that the space for that is, weirdly enough, sitcoms. Good Girls was just canceled, but I think that Good Girls was a very interesting depiction of conventional crime drama with, you know, mothers who are single going through divorces, trying to juggle relationships, and trying to juggle marriages simultaneously with parenting. That's a little bit looser as it's a crime drama, and unfortunately was just canceled. But also there is Workin' Moms on Netflix, which is a really great depiction of women trying to, quote unquote, as Tina Fey would say, have it all, in 30 Rock. And then additionally, I think there's a film called Single Parents on ABC and Hulu, that is, there's an SNL guy who is kind of one of the main characters, but it's basically about single parents, and it shows men and women doing parenting stuff. And when I just think about depictions of parenting in the Lens format, I just keep coming back to these interesting sitcom characters that get to sit in 80 plus hours of episodes and really show what it's like to be something. I don't know that I would argue that film has to do that. I would just say that I think that sitcom is doing a more interesting job of it contemporarily.
Yeah, I do think there are things like parenting, things like marriage that are so defined by their long-term nature. Like the marriage is something that is supposed to never end. That makes it, in a way, very suited for a serial format like television. Parenting, you know,
right? Breaking Bad, one of the most interesting depictions of marriage of all time.
Yeah, you have kids. If you have kids, you have your kids until you die or they die. It is a very forever kind of thing. It makes sense for the serial format. Pregnancy horror, though, seems like something that could fit well within a film.
Yeah, I'd like to see an original version of it, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not saying that this is it, but I would think that, I mean, with something so well defined, it is 9 months. There is a beginning, a middle, and an end with such clearly defined stages that everyone can relate to, or everyone is familiar with to some degree. I think it makes it actually sort of like almost too easy of a thing to use in a movie structurally. Which is weird. Like, I don't even really feel like I kind of experienced, like, the arc of this pregnancy in a way.
That's because it's not conventionally depicted. Right? It's like she's pregnant and then there's 30 minutes until the comeuppance. I feel like it's very beat, over. And we already know what the over kind of is. You get the sense that she's going to do what she does. I won't spoil that just because if I did, you would literally have no reason to sit through this movie. And if anyone wants to suffer through it, you're going to need a reason to finish it.
It's on Hulu, if you would like to check it out.
I hate it more than you, from what I can tell. So I win.
There you go.
Round 1.
That was false positive.
On to Adam Leon's Italian Studies, follow-up to Netflix's Tramps. All right, Michael, this is a film that stars Vanessa Kirby as she kind of flits and floats around New York City after losing her dog. And I still don't know what her character's name is, or if anything that I saw is technically accurate or true outside of the dog coming back.
I think those comments nicely capture the elusiveness of this film and its narrative and its content. You said this was on your top 10 for the festival, yeah?
It is. It's in my top 5.
Top 5?
I think it's number 4.
Yeah, so you responded well.
It's probably in my top 30 to 40 on the year.
Solid. Yes, story-wise, we meet Vanessa Kirby. We meet her not in New York City, but I think in it's a European city, I think, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, you're talking about the record studio.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know where that was. Unfortunately, I just had the opportunity to watch this the once, and then
Same.
It I think expired on Tribeca's playback thing. So I don't recall that, but I can tell you that I loved that music that they were recording. Absolutely loved it. It was a great introduction.
It's Let's Eat Grandma, the band, like an indie pop band. Good stuff. I'm a big fan.
Yeah,
okay. Good stuff to check out.
I'll have to get you to send me the link to listen to more after this.
Yeah. So I imagine it was more mood that you responded to than story here, or was it ideas that were coming to mind?
Yeah, there's all that. I think we've briefly talked about this, but one of my favorite things in the one of the things that I like in storytelling is when a story is being told about a character, and whatever the interpretation is, if it's an audiobook, if it's an audio podcast, if it's a written book, if it's a film, if it's a television show, if you can make me the interpreter of the story, whatever the medium is, feel the way that the main character feels, that's one of my favorite things. And what this film does is it presupposes Vanessa Kirby into a sort of fugue state. And at no point does it cohesively make sense outside of its various vignettes. And you end up feeling removed from time and confused about where you are, not only in time, but place, and your identity, and who you are, and who she is, and what exactly is the foot. Which library am I in? Is a thought that I had at one point in time. And the fact that I was thinking all those things in a film about a fugue state, ostensibly, goes a long way for me. It went a long way for me in that specific, just to bring it back up again, Breaking Bad episode, where Walter White goes into a fugue state, and that episode really makes you confused about what exactly is happening, and by the end, you come to learn the term fugue state, which is probably where I learned it from. And that's exactly what this is. It's about being unmoored and kind of mercurial, floating through time and space without really a defined identity, and then adapting to situations, which is exactly what it's asking you, the viewer, to do, to just kind of buy into whatever's happening right now. All of a sudden, it almost takes up a documentary aspect where she's asking these kids these questions. And it reminded me of my own personal times where it's like you're trying to invent a character and write a character. And you're almost asking yourself to answer yourself so that you can invent something that is different than yourself. And all that really spoke to me. And I don't think it will for most people, but I think that for a few people that have my sensibilities or something like them, it'll be very, it's a very beautiful attempt to show what that artistic creation process almost is like.
Yeah, I think I would agree about the sense of unmoorage that it gives us. I guess the kind of issue for me is that it doesn't really help me understand what it is I'm even being unmoored from. I kind of feel like there's no solid ground in this movie that it's sort of starting from. It feels a little too wispy and elusive for its own good.
Can I just interject? I don't mean to throw you off track, but that's exactly what it would be like if you were in a fugue state. You wouldn't remember who you were.
Yeah,
So you wouldn't have that concrete. So the thing that I like, which is the fact that you feel what it would be like to be in a fugue state, is exactly what you don't like, because you would like to have a structure to the film where there's kind of a more clear delineation of train stops along the way. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think there's just sort of an absence of meaning in the headspace it puts me in. I just don't know that I find it all that interesting of a headspace to be in. I think it's partly that I'm not on the Vanessa Kirby train personally. This cluelessness and confusion that she embodies, I think feels just kind of labored to me. I personally just don't really respond to the performance. I think it seems a little strained, and it feels a little bit like we got a movie star, let's make a movie, and it becomes more of kind of an exercise in wisp than narrative. Which, I mean, I love non-narrative stuff. I feel like most stuff that I'm really drawn to is not plot-centric, but this feels just pretty. This feels pretty weightless, even though there is some kind of style and innovation that I really like. I think this is definitely the most interesting of the three movies for me that we're talking about, just because it is doing something a little more risky formally, and sort of making it a bit blurry what's in so-called reality within this movie and what's sort of the fiction that our character is drawing up in her head. But I think it's just a little too kind of untethered from anything that I can find meaningful or interesting, though it does put us in that headspace, I would agree.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree with anything that you said, aside from the fact that you don't think Vanessa Kirby is a talented actress. I
haven't seen her in that many movies.
I would show you The Crown and ask you
seen The Crown.
to reconsider. I would also force you to watch Mission Impossible Fallout and force you to reconsider.
I liked her in Fallout. I'm sure if we go back and listen to ourselves talk about that, I'm sure I
feel like you sang her.
So I should say that in this movie, I did not respond quite as much. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's tough because it's so subjective, the reason I like it. So I think that anyone else that dislikes it for any sort of a broader, more conventional reason, or even a personal reason, has just as much ground to stand on. So I won't say you're wrong or anything. It's just like I had the privilege of not viewing it in any sort of a negative space, and I really appreciated the fact that it made me, the viewer, feel the way that she is supposed to be feeling from my interpretation of the film. And I really liked the warm world, cold world aside. I think that's exactly how I would break down how people feel about this. You're either warm towards it or you're cold towards it, and you're not necessarily wrong. It's just the interpretation of the piece that you're inhabiting. I also liked the same aside in that moment where there's a all bread sandwich. If you take two pieces of bread and you insert another piece of bread in the middle of it, is that not the definition of a bread sandwich?
These are tough questions.
Yeah. How are you gonna lubricate that hot dog? I believe is another discussion in that moment. There's a lot of fun stuff. There's just to get into some of the conventions. There's some stuff that I think is maybe the reason that you responded warmly towards it. Some of the documentarian aspect maybe interested you. I'm just riffing here. And I'm going to guess that you liked a lot of the alley and street level cinematography that's very reminiscent of the Safdie brothers. And therefore Scorsese, I suppose.
They hadn't come to mind, but I could see that,
They shoot some bodegas, they shoot trucks getting unloaded. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a very different kind of tempo. But yeah, in terms of the kind of New York ness of it, yeah, I could see that.
And it wasn't shot gaudily, it was very much that street level, like kind of soft-esque, where it's just like this is the neighborhood. This is the jewelry store next to the bodega that's getting the Coca-Cola put in the bodega.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't want to come down too hard on it. It's because I honestly feel like I didn't get that great a grip on it, and I think that is probably not a surprising response. But a lot of what I felt this movie trying to do, I just didn't really get a handle on with it. With some of the interviews with the younger teenagers that our lead character comes to hang out with over the course of this night. I just don't know that I ever really totally got my head around what this movie is trying to do in terms of her relationship to these kids and what this story might mean to her. I mean, I'm totally willing to say that I think it just slipped through my fingers. But, when that happens, you can only respond so much. I definitely think it's something I would have been a bit more engrossed by if I had seen it in a theater. This is not the kind of thing where you should watch it midday as I did. Partly because I just didn't expect this from the director of something like Tramps. It's a very different kind of movie. This is very mood-centric and kind of more about ambiance in a way, whereas that was a little caper in New York City. Gimme the Loot was kind of similar. So it was partly just that it caught me off guard that maybe didn't help it. But, on a second go-round, I think it's entirely possible I'd be more open to it.
All right. Let me give you 2 different versions, if I can. And I'm saying to myself, if I can, of what occurred within the film. So there's 2 theories, and I'll give you my theory, the way that I viewed it before I read anything else. And then I'll give you the more, I think, conventional view from other folks. So the view that I had was that parts of the film are true and parts of the film are inventions of character talking to her so that she can write her next piece, essentially, and that those characters introduced her back to her own work so that she can write, and that a few characters at the party weren't real, and that's when she was kind of drinking and really getting loose to find herself. And she did actually share that moment in the restaurant because she did actually meet that girl who she meets outside the recording studio. That's the way that I watched the film. That's the way that I viewed it. I can't guarantee that those people that she's interviewing where she's off screen and there's no real correlation to prove that they're within the world with her. I think that that's where it gets very interesting. The version that I think David Ehrlich presupposes and a few other people kind of state that the film could be viewed through the lens of is that when she goes outside the record studio, she's about to do this again. And that the entire thing was like all those people were not real, and that it was all her writing process and her meeting these characters and going on this trip with them, and that's she went into this creative fugue state, and that going into that recording studio and seeing that creativity re-inspired her to go be creative again, and she walked out and went back into that confused mercurial fugue-like state where she re-meets a character who reminds her of some characters that she'd written previously, and goes on and ostensibly maybe she goes on and does that again at the end of the film. Like maybe it's introducing you to her repeating the same process. I personally think that's a little bit more forced of a theory, but I've read a lot more pieces that had that interpretation than mine.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just coming up short here because I don't even know that I can pick between the two. I understand the idea behind the two interpretations here. I don't know if I do subscribe to one or the other. I think there are just kind of ways certain things hit me, and then I don't know if I can even fit them into an overall scheme. I think things like the interviews themselves, where we're not seeing Vanessa Kirby, we're just seeing her kind of off camera acting as interviewer with these teens. These felt like they were occurring in kind of an interior space to me, like they were interviews with fictional characters. She was trying to understand her fictional characters. But as for how much of the on the streets experience we see is within her head being fictionalized versus real, I really can't say. And I think that slipperiness is a good thing, but I just I do wish there was a little bit more for me to hold on to. I actually kind of hate that I'm saying that. I like something that's a little bold, but I don't know, just came up a little short somehow.
Yeah, let me just complete the announcement that while that's my interpretation, I don't necessarily think that's correct, or even if it is correct, that it's the right interpretation to always have. I think that this is a film that should be adapted, that you should feel as differently about on various screens as Vanessa Kirby seems to feel as she goes. I think that the idea of a right interpretation for this film is exactly what Adam didn't want. And we'll later record another episode about Thief, in which the end of the film, him and the star disagree about what exactly that meant. And I think that that's where it gets interesting, places like this. I hated false positives, so I did not want to talk about any images per se or scenes. But with this one, do you have a favorite scene?
That's hard, because this kind of feels like one big scene to me, to be honest. That's probably in part because it's been a little longer since I actually watched this one between...
for both of us.
Yeah. So it's kind of all a bit of a blur, and I think that's kind of a good thing about this movie, that's kind of the idea. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'd go with the intro. The intro actually pulled me in only because I recognized the music. I'll go with something super personal. That I think the music is great. I think it's Nicholas Britell who does the score.
He does.
I think some of that's pretty great. I mean, I do think I was maybe pulled in a bit by some of these opening scenes, and just some of the curiosity was stimulating. What about you?
So just on that note, I do think this is one of those movies that's going to be like not critically panned, but really mixed right now. I think that in 10 or 20 years, a lot more people are going to come up on it. I think that the more distance we get from it, the more we might appreciate the piece for being just the piece. Like it's going to kind of be its own song. And whether or not we understand the song or really get the lyrics or whatever, like I think we might just appreciate it a lot more in the future than we do now. My favorite scene is where she tries to catch some sleep on the... not the banister. God, there's the platform between stairs. I forget the term of what that word is, but she's asleep on the stairwell, and the sun's rising through the windows, and it's coming in, and it casts the staircase little what would that even be called? The little pillars that are holding up the banister of the staircase, and those are projected onto her, and she's in a prison of shadow cast by light while she's in this in-between state where you can see she's waking up but she's still asleep. And that just I think that scene is kind of in essence the film. I love that scene, and I can still remember it perfectly. It's a beautiful image.
Nice. I like it.
On to Last Film Show. Michael, fitting to his character, does not like nice things, fun things, or warm things.
I don't think that is a fair characterization.
That is completely fair, and you are not allowed to fight that characterization, sir.
I take it you were more positive than I was on last film show?
It wasn't hard. All you had to be was mixed, and you'd be more positive than you on this one. I think you gave this one a 2 out of 5.
I mean, I'll say I'm mixed. Mix is fine. I wouldn't know that I'd give it an F, but I mean, I didn't love this movie. I'll put it that way.
American grading system, you gave it an F. You gave it at most 44, 46 out of 100. That's an F, sir.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm rating things that I just don't like, I don't spend very much time watching movies that I don't care for. So, like, the ratings don't mean much at that point because I don't even really know how to distinguish between a movie that I dislike versus really dislike. It's like, is that a 1 or a 2 stars out of 5? Like,
hate versus
every
print of this should be destroyed.
Yeah, it just didn't do as much for me, put it that way. But this is directed by Pan Nolan, I believe. Set in India. It's about a little boy falling in love with movies at his local cinema against his father's wishes. You liked it, yeah?
I did like it. I will mention that I think the boy grows up and is living in the same city that he grew up in, and, you know, it's fairly autobiographical in that sense, I think. Yeah, there's a lot of good faith and earnestness here. I'd say I'm 50-50 on movies that try to be really hyper positive and look back at film with this kind of rose-colored glasses, if you will. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the ones that I definitely am on the positive side of, compared to the negative side. There's, I guess, 2 others that come off the top of my head, Hugo and I think it's called Searching for Fellini or Finding Fellini, and it's about
that sounds familiar.
A girl who kind of falls in love with the films of Fellini and wants to go to France, and I think that's probably one of my favorite ones of all time, just because of the convention and the unconvention of it. But yeah, it's just romanticism, and it's it's, I think, competently and interestingly, cohesively shot. The love for food is I think really not overstated, but a nice little blend into the picture as it goes. The movement from steam to electricity is a nice kind of stand-in for the cohesive movement of film to the digital format. There's just a lot here that I responded warmly towards. To reference Italian studies again, this was just a warm world movie for me, not cold world.
Yeah, I would very much describe it as a movie that is warm in temperature. I wouldn't say I hated it by any ways. I was a little ready for it to be over after 75% of the way through or so.
Yeah, I would
did
say
not
it
love
does
this.
overstay its welcome. Like I think it could have been
2 hours,
tighter paced.
Yeah.
The first 45 I think were really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think this has earnestness in spades. I don't know that I would say it gave me too much in terms of I don't think I had anything resembling a complex response to much of what it showed me. I don't know that it's a good thing when you can watch a movie and you pretty much know how every review of it will sound like. This one being, it's an ode to the movies. It's a love letter to cinema, and it very much is those things, and it's very sweet in that regard. I think it is totally fine. I would encourage people to see it if it sounds good to me. For me, it was a little corny. I think the filmmaking is a little over-emphatic about things that should be a little more subtle. I like some of the sentiments and ideas about this boy learning about how cinema is born from light, and from light we get stories. I think it's delivered a little heavy-handedly, and just it's a little lacking in eloquence with these ideas that I like. Who would and what cinephile wouldn't? It just seems a little contrived as cinephilic catbait to me, catnip. I combine my words there. I think it's fine.
Catfish.
Yeah,
catfish,
yeah, exactly.
This movie's a catfish.
I think it's fine. I mean, it's just I not something I'm terribly excited about. I think It's kind of exactly what you would think a sweet movie about a little boy falling in love with the movies would be. I don't think it really surprises you at any turns. I don't think it really wants anything to be very coarse or challenging. But it's cute. I mean, I don't even like using the word cute, but I think that's what this movie kind of wants to be. So that's fine. I don't mean to sound condescending in that way. I can give you an example, like where the boy first goes to the cinema and he's sort of looking around the theater and his mouth is kind of falling open, right? And there's a cut to the fan in the corner. And that's the kind of cut that I think other directors might not underline, because they know we can kind of pick up as observant viewers what this space is like and kind of pick out the details that he would probably remember from his childhood. This movie, I think, underlines a lot of its ideas and sentiments in a way that I just don't think makes for a very interesting experience.
Interesting. So I agree with everything you said until that anecdote. And the reason that I kind of disagree about that anecdote is because I believe preceding that or directly after that, we spent some time on the train tracks with the boy. And there's a direct, I think, reference and love there to Sergio Leone's hypercuts. That fan, cutting directly to it in that way just really brings it front and center in a very Leone way. So I think that one, particularly that intro from Once Upon a Time in the West, where it's the train station and we're getting the sense of the cut to show us all these different things about the train station. It was kind of like showing us all these different things about the theater after walking the train tracks. So that I didn't mind as much, but I do think that it is cute. It is forced. It is autobiographical. It is overtly conventional in many ways. It doesn't take any real risks. But it's cute. It does succeed in being cute. It's like looking at a stuffed animal and saying that is a stuffed animal. It's exactly what you expect it to be, and nothing really more than that. And it doesn't fail. It doesn't have a sharp tag or a zipper, if I'm continuing the stuffed animal analogy. You're getting softness essentially everywhere that you want to hug the stuffed animal or press it to your flesh. So it's not going to betray you, really. But it also gets slightly uninteresting. I think that if I was 7 to 12, I would really love this movie. I would really respond and identify with the casting of light through different things and being enamored by that. Remember watching the Sinbad films and as a young boy, checking them out from the library and watching Ray Harryhausen's monsters come to life and just being so enamored. And I see a lot of that boy in the way that Pan is depicting this, but that only goes so far in certain ranges. And though I'm positive on it, I don't think that it's breaking ground or is a must-see or any of that stuff. It's just, it is exactly what we said. It's a love letter. It's an ode to cinema. And if you're in the mood that you need an ode to cinema and you don't want to watch, 20 hours of Martin Scorsese talk to you about the movies, then I guess you could watch this one instead. What I did appreciate about this was the unfamiliarity that I have with Indian cinema and seeing some of the great ones brought to life and his excitement from it, because it's so foreign to me and I haven't had those experiences. We've talked for years about trying to work more Indian films into our watching habits, and I think for at least 2 years tried to figure out how to do an Apu trilogy episode. So maybe, if anything, we can use this as fuel to that fire for me to make that happen with you. But yeah, I see mostly where you're coming from in all other counts.
Yeah, I would totally second the comment about just the exposure to some of the Indian movies we see the kid watching. You know, I don't know that we sit on too many of them long enough for me to have really have grown interest in like any particular film. Like maybe, you know, if it had kind of doubled down on like there being a film that really jumped out to him, like it, you know, it definitely leans into stuff like 2001 or Tarkovsky or Leone. But I kind of wish I came away with it from like even one, maybe they named some Indian movies. It probably does, and I'm just forgetting.
Well, particularly there's that star. There's like the star, and they do the patter in like the first 50 minutes of like his dialogue exchange with that other guy. And like it made me want to see that scene. It made me want to see that Indian star of Bollywood. Yeah,
for sure. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there are plenty of other love letters to movies out there that just offer a fresher take on it. Like when at the end it's just, you know, he's kind of listing a bunch of great directors. I don't disagree. I love them too. Like all the ones I know, at least. But you know, I don't know that it's not really producing any response that I find interesting or striking. It's just sweet, and that's fine. But I don't know. I'm it's just not in my sweet spot at the moment, to use that word twice in a row.
Yeah, I completely agree, because what this does is it tries to be a love letter and ode to cinema. What it also is it serves as Pan's depiction of himself autobiographically. And in doing that, we don't really get to invest into the genres that he's homaging, truly. And I think that it would be a lot more interesting to see someone go big and make a 10-hour film that's risky and make it an anthology.
Yeah.
Where it's a little boy that's like falling in love with film or whatever, and then he goes to bed after 45 minutes and wakes up, and all of a sudden we're in 45 minutes to an hour of sci-fi film where it's direct homage to Kubrick and Tarkovsky within the genre of sci-fi in space. And then whatever happens and it fades, and then we're in Lars von Trier world and everything's fucked up and it's hellish. Like, I would rather see a big risk where this little boy type character is inserted into these different things that you're trying to pay homage to, and then you take big risks trying to marry your autobiography into the genre itself and the filmic language adjustments that they informed. You know, show me how Fritz Lang moved you over an hour and insert a little boy into it, and don't stay in the same conventional area. Pretend it's a dream. Commit to showing me Lang world, where you're trying to balance how to communicate that he's both German and American and his filmic languages intermingling. Like, that would be so much more risky and interesting, and even if it failed, I'd be so much more excited to have watched it.
Yeah. I mean, we get a lot of expressions from this kid as he reacts to different movies. I'm sure the Von Trier expression would be memorable. That's for sure. Yeah, you know, I mean,
he'd bite his tongue off.
Evidently, it is autobiographical. I think you can kind of just pick up on that, you know, with these kinds of movies, that you just sense that this is born out of real experience. But I almost think it kind of just undersells its own personalness, because the kid feels a little kind of familiar to me, you know, these kind of the troublemaking nature, the relationship with the father, who's kind of a disciplinarian and just wants him to see devotional movies, not the pop entertainment. I think it comes pretty close to just being kind of cliche in how it portrays some of those relationships. I actually was kind of intrigued by the mother, partly because we don't see as much from her, but I think you just see these looks from her that seem to really contain some feeling, and I kept wanting to like come back to her and kind of experience that a bit more. And you know, I think you could argue like that his dad hits him and stuff, and that's something that's a little thornier about the movie, but even that feels a little undersold or something like that. And by no means am I saying you need to beat the kid hard or something like that. That sounds weird, but you know, it's just a way in which this movie seems to continue to want to kind of soften things in favor of being that sweet ode to the movies that it is.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with all that. I've already seen a bunch of kids get hit. Like,
I don't need more of that necessarily.
Either show me a really good hit or a really good reason why you're getting hit, or like why do you need to do that? Is it to inform the father character? Because like he's already got it rough enough. Like you don't need to double down on that. And then more time with the mom, because whenever she's making food, I just want to pause the film and hit print. Like, it just looks so much more interesting than when I prepare food.
Now we could go on about that for sure.
So this is a film that I might have a favorite scene for. I'm definitely more positive on it than you. Do you have a favorite scene in this movie, or are you just totally left cold by it?
Do I have a favorite scene? I mean, I guess idea-wise, one thing we see him reacting to at the end is watching all of these old film prints be destroyed and remade into, like, bracelets. Mm-hmm. I think particularly for women, and he sees young girls wearing these bracelets on the train. I think you could argue that there's something a little complex about that. Like, there is something very bittersweet in feeling surrounded by stories that are stories you will never experience again. So even though it's maybe a little on the nose or a little bit lacking in poetry, I do kind of like that sentiment that it kind of ends on, because I think that's maybe a little bit more thought-provoking, perhaps. So that's kind of a group of scenes towards the end, but I'll go with that. What about you?
I'll go with the cheesy scene where all the boys are working together to try to get the fucking image to project onto the screen of the single cell. And just the innovativeness and the commitment and the romanticism towards the story and the idea. Like, I completely vibe with that. I remember exactly when I was that kid and how badly I wanted to be able to see those images, and how badly I wanted to see more images and get access to more stories. And that I would have been willing to break into a cinema and steal a bunch of trunks of film celluloid just so that I could spend time with each of those images, and how active my own internal monologue was about each of those things. So it inspired me because it reminded me of my own history.
I like it. Well, that's it for Tribeca 2021.
I'm Taylor Baker, and I'm here with Essie Davis, who just had her film The Justice of Bunny King premiere at Tribeca 2021 Film Festival. And let's start with the most, I think, important sentence you say in the entire film, which is, "You just keep that door locked." That's a terrible and powerful sentence. You made it appear effortless, and the stakes shift immediately in those moments. Did it feel as easy as it looked as you delivered that line and all the sentiment behind it, and how you just kind of changed the entire stakes of the film from then on? It's no longer about your kids coming to the garage. It's about you getting Thomas into safety at some level.
Wow. You just gave me goosebumps talking about that in that way. I don't know if that was consciously my turning point. I think the turning point happens for Bunny when she sees what's going on and decides to walk through the door into the garage and confront it. She knows in that moment that
there's no going back.
There's no going back. As soon as she gets out her little money bag and smashes him around the head. I think, just knowing that her niece is in that danger, and having experienced it, and knowing that her sister has experienced it and is essentially married to a perpetrator like that, it's a pretty dark place to sort of enter and go, right, there's no way. It's no
very
way
dark.
Anyone that I can care for I will allow to be put into that situation.
Yeah, but there's just a certain effortlessness to the way that you get into these really heightened emotions throughout the film. I don't know if it was conscious for you or a decision you made early on, but you sometimes have like a very, very faint voice with your character, especially when she's talking to her daughter, and you're having these really sweet interactions, and that just kind of increases the emotionality for when there's these loud confrontations, especially in these scenes, just because of the stakes for them. But even at the end, during that kind of dog day afternoon kind of ending that you guys have, there's a few heightened scenes there, especially when they're trying to separate Thomason's character from you, and you have to smash the window and undo the door.
Yeah, that was fun. That was my idea. I said, I've got to smash a window. Something has to break. There has to be something that has to break in this moment. It was quite interesting. I don't necessarily read reviews, but I do when they're sort of put under my nose. And one of the reviews said that these sort of steadily more unbelievable scenarios sort of are a detriment to the film. But I loved what you just said about Dog Day Afternoon, because that was certainly an inspiration. Why wouldn't they believe that Bunny King would go to those lengths to save her children?
Yeah,
and I mean, to be with her children when what they believe Al Pacino would go to those lengths to get a sex change job for his partner. I mean,
yes, yeah,
really, they're both
it's a
quite
real
heightened.
Story, right?
Yeah,
it's based on a true story. But I think that the crucial thing is that during the Dog Day Afternoon sequence, if you will, I don't know the name of the character, but the woman who had locked you in the room, she goes back in at some point. I don't know if you've watched the entire film after shooting it, but she's looking at the record of Bunny, and it shows, if you read between the lines, that the person she killed, her husband or partner, was ostensibly abusing the children or her, and that she was in fact defending them. And then all of a sudden, this is just a continuation of defending the kids from being hurt by an exterior source. So I think that for me, the internal logic was completely there. That doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, I think it's quite a logical film.
Yeah.
And what I love so much about Bunny is that she never gives up, and that she's eternally hopeful, and she's always trying to make things better for everyone around her, particularly her children and people in her care. And even when living in the on her sister's and brother-in-law's couch, she cares for their children, she cares for his mother, she does all the cooking, she does all the washing and cleaning and folding, she picks the kids up from school. She's incredibly generous, and just everything she does is really done generously and with love. And I think that it's a representation of millions of women in this situation who rarely get their voice out there into the world, and everyone is so quick to judge. And yet so many women on the poverty line trying to look after their children, trying with all their might, and really unsupported by the governments, certainly in Western society, completely unsupported by their government, and by the sort of legal system of protection of women who are experiencing domestic violence, have survived domestic violence, who've survived prison after perhaps murdering their partners, because of in self-defense or in defense of their children. I think it's a kind of upbeat, positive, shout it out loud kind of, come on guys, we're just trying here kind of voice that really needs to be heard at this time.
Yeah, it's an exasperated but hopeful voice. You're talking about the value of childcare and all this home labor as well that your character does. Meanwhile, we're starting with you washing windows on the streets with that group or gang of folks that's a really fun character group. But gosh, when you talk, when your character talks your sister's husband into letting the kids and you stay in the garage, we've just seen like this entire exasperating day and like everything you've done and everything you're expected to do, and then he says you just gotta keep chipping in more money. And it just kind of it underlines in a great foreshadowing way like just how much of a dick this guy is. Like just we watched you take care of all of his responsibilities essentially, and then he's like, sure, as long as you're giving me more money.
more money than what I pay to look after his family and sleep on his couch after his mates have finished their drunken night of watching the football.
Yeah, there's quite a few moments like that. I did have a question about the car washing scenes. Did you guys do all those at once? Did you get to kind of riff, or were those scripted?
Oh, look, it was a mixture of script and improvisation. I mean, we had a few days washing windscreen, and we had a fair amount of practice too. We did some practice days with real intersections, and it was part riff, part scripted, but it was really complicated to lock off a big sort of area intersection, sort of multi-lane intersection, and get changing traffic moving through it. And it was a pretty low budget film, and so we got to know a lot of those drivers quite well.
Good. I don't know if you're familiar with the Florida Project, but those scenes in particular, with the way the sun's hitting, you say it's low budget, but it feels like it's real. It looks pretty and it feels like it's real world. So it kind of had a little bit of that Sean Baker taste to it, where it felt like, this is the real world, and these are real moments that we're kind of seeing where you and the other folks working or laughing or playing a joke, or particularly there's in the middle of the film a scene where you kind of get into it with a guy who doesn't want his windscreen washed, and then you throw some stuff at it. So
I think that's my fellow squeegee bandit throwing stuff at,
is it okay?
At a screen. I tell it as
that's right. You were
going to give us a bad reputation, but then when the abuse comes back at me, I'm just I hold my own.
Gets set off just a little bit. There's a few moments that you kind of get to build the believability of the character in the world just by your singular actions. The first apartment showing you go to, there's a great interaction with that agent, but you go into the bathroom, and by the time you leave the bathroom after being quite angry and checking the water pressure, you've captured the soap. Was that a scripted choice that you made? Was that a riff? Because that really just is like, this is money in the pocket for tomorrow, because I can use this to wash windscreen.
It's a great moment, isn't it? That was actually scripted. Okay. I wish I could claim that as my own. I quite often
you played it, so I couldn't tell it was scripted.
Yeah, there were more scenes that didn't make it to the film of house hunting.
Okay.
And in really scuzzy and group share, get one room to one, 6x4 room to share with your children, and and they didn't make it into the film because film can only be so long. But it was like going into that apartment was like the best apartment. It was like the dream apartment.
It was a pretty good apartment. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Did you make any early choices before you even started playing Bunny about how she was going to be different than other characters that you've played? I think that your strength, I don't have extreme familiarity with your filmography, but I think just comparatively off the recent stuff I've seen, Bunny's strength is a lot more reserved, and it just comes out almost by action more, where some of your other characters are a little bit more strongly worded, or they have like almost a hand up to keep people away from them. But Bunny's kind of accepting until anything threatens her kids or anything's like actually morally wrong, and then the hammer.
I spent quite a bit of time in New Zealand before I began the actual shoot, doing pre with Clawson and meeting a lot of people and doing a lot of research. I don't think that I try and work out how to do things differently from other characters. I just try and be as honest to the character that I am playing at the time, and as informed, and try and get as much, ammunition under my belt to get me through, which meant doing a lot of dialect work, because although New Zealand might sound similar to Australian for an American ear, it's one of the hardest accents to do.
I bet.
And I knew that I was the only non-New Zealander in the entire cast and crew, and I needed it to be 100% authentic, so everyone would believe.
Well, you convinced this American. That doesn't really mean anything. Ask someone from New Zealand.
I think I've done okay for the New Zealanders. They were, the whole crew were like, "Yeah, you're rocking it, babe."
Good.
I think what I love so much about Bunny is that upbeat. She's ready to crack a joke. She's ready to she's happy in her own skin in a funny kind of way. She doesn't need anything except a job and a home, and she's just completely judged constantly for what she looks like, what she does, and her history, and the fact that her kids are in foster care. So when she goes into that sort of dress to impress, or dress for success, or whatever it's called, charity business, which we have both in Australia and in New Zealand, where
she gets her magic outfit.
Women can be dressed in donated clothing to make a difference and get a job, or at an interview or whatever. She doesn't want to wear dresses. She doesn't really want to dress up at all. But all of a sudden, this beautiful woman gives her a suit that becomes her magic suit, because instantly she puts it on. It's like a mask that's magic, and people treated her completely differently, and she uses it in the best possible way she can to try and achieve great things. It's a John Travolta,
and
Saturday Night Fever suit.
It's a good outfit for the dog day afternoon thing. I know we do have to wrap up here soon. I did want to ask you a question not about the movie. I just wanted to ask you if you had a favorite performer growing up, someone that influenced you, maybe a favorite actress that you wanted to model yourself after, anything like that.
Oh, so many. Judy Davis in Australia was a huge mentor for me and role model, and also, you know, Peter Weir as a director. He's sort of the person who inspired me really to want to be an actor when I was a child.
Cool.
And with Picnic at Hanging Rock, and Meryl Streep, obviously, she's just really fantastic. And Emma Thompson, Judi Dench, all of those great women that I just were you know, wow, the little boy in Oliver Twist, the movie. I wanted to be a child actor and be as great as he was.
That's awesome. And then last question. I know that you and your husband, Justin Kurtzel, filmed, I think, a film called Nitram. Do you know when audiences can see that or when it's going to premiere?
So Justin Kurzel,
sorry.
It's all right. It's called Nitram, and it is actually having its world premiere in competition at the Cannes Film Festival.
Awesome.
On very soon in July, in the middle of July.
Excellent.
So after that, I am sure it will reach the world. And yeah, that's another film I'm incredibly proud of, and I'm super proud of him.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I'm looking forward to seeing Nitram, and hopefully I'll get to speak with you again sometime down the road.
No worries. Thank you so much, Taylor.
Thank you.
And that's another one in the can.